it is time for Stretch Plays with Glenn Stretch Smith, former Cowboys scout and coach, joining us on the Doomsday Podcast. And Stretch, big win for the Cowboys, trailing 13-6, seemingly in trouble with a backup quarterback on the road. They get it done. They respond after some really bad drops in the first half and get a win. Before we start kind of going position by position, how big do you think this win was for the Cowboys as they improved to 2-1 and improved to 3-0 all time when Cooper Rush is their starting quarterback?
I mean, I know you want to start with a quarterback. I know everybody wants to start, and he did a great job of managing the game. I'm not taking that away from him. But I'm going to tell you something. The guy I've got to give credit to is Kellen Moore. I mean, he knows exactly what Cooper Rush's strengths are. And his strengths are to max protect, which leaves two tight ends in, 7 or 8 man protection, throw the ball in the middle of the field where he doesn't really have to drive the ball outside the numbers, give him some throws that he can make, and he executes those throws. So, I mean, first of all, not only have I let Kellen Moore back in the building, I mean, in 2 weeks, the damn guy's summa cum laude. I mean, he's back at the top of his class for what he's done, I believe, with this Cowboy offense. He ran the football. They did a nice job of bringing Noah Brown in motion and leading him up in there. I was kind of surprised on that last play because they were mad at the linebacker and the safety for coming downhill and attacking Noah Brown, thinking they were fixing to run that lead up in there. I got to give Kellen Moore a lot of credit. I'm just telling you. And all of a sudden, he went from game 1, it felt like he was interviewing to get a job in the NFL, to game 2 and 3, understanding, man, I've got to get this backup quarterback some throws that he can make. I got to run the ball. I got to use all of my personnel. I got to use tight ends. Hell, they weren't even on the roster week 1. I just thought his game plan, how they executed it, I mean, was really good. And you got to give Cooper Rush credit. They gave him the throws that he could make, and that's exactly what he did in the football game.
Well, you're right. I mean, Hendershot is in there and wasn't expected to make the team. He had a 30-yard catch tonight, and he made some plays, and you overcame some really bad drops. Jalen Tolbert, bad deep drop, and then, of course, in the first half, just a tremendous throw right in the hands of CeeDee Lamb. He didn't make it, but he makes up for it on that deciding drive. And Stretch, let's go to that. Let's go to the offense first. Jason Peters, the guy was a long-time all-pro left tackle, he decides to retire, and the Cowboys bring him back at age 40 or 41 and say, hey, why don't you go in there and play some left guard? And on that first offensive possession that he's in the game, that's the third possession of the game, Pollard breaks off a 46-yard run. What did you make of, Tyler Smith at left tackle, Jason Peters playing some left guard, the entire offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, when you look, Smith had a holding call. They've got to get that cleaned up. I mean, it's almost like I want to go in there and say, you know what, Mike McCarthy, why don't you put boxing gloves on these guys that get holding calls? You can't hold with a pair of boxing gloves on. It makes you get a hand. You need me to teach you how to coach? It teaches you how to keep hand position. I thought if you take those things away, this offensive line is starting to grow together. I mean, be honest, the end of the game right there. Hey, they weren't listening to any of that yapping. They were in there saying, hey, I tell you what, we just kicked your ass and right in your own backyard, and you better like it. To me, you kind of like those guys that get a little bit of that, starts with an S and ends with a T in their neck. I mean, you got to like that. And so I love what the offensive line did. I like Hendershot. Now, he comes with a questionable background, but I tell you what, it looks like he's got that same kind of that attitude. Did a great job blocking. Ferguson was in there, led up in there on the goal line play. And I think when you look at how this offense has gone from week 1 to now to week 3 with a backup quarterback, and say whatever you want, it's hard to win in the NFL, and to go out and win the way they didn't turn the football over, perfect. Right when the screen wasn't there, Russ just drilled it into the ground. I mean, if it wasn't there, throw it away, live to fight another day. And guess what, Matt? I mean, they're feeding off of one another now. They're playing complementary football. The offense knows we don't have to score every time. We got to put our defense in good position. And so when you think about that and you let it all come together for you, and when you talked about CeeDee Lamb, to me, Noah Brown is the MVP of the game. I mean, you saw what he did and how he was blocking on the perimeter. You saw CeeDee Lamb, they threw that little wide receiver screen. He got 1.5 yards. They threw it to Noah Brown. He got 9.5. Just ran the corner over. So to me, it's an infectious thing that's going on offensively. And after game one and Kellen Moore saying, I better hang on to the job I got instead of trying to interview for a head coaching job, they've done a hell of a job.
All right, and a good point. Noah Brown made some great catches early and has really been solid for them. And let's remember they got Michael Gallup likely coming back against the Commanders next week. Let's go to the quarterback and the running backs. Obviously, Pollard is your most explosive back, but let's stick with Cooper Rush. They put him in a good position. I like what you said. They're not trying to have him do things he's not capable of, but I kind of like the fact that instead of, it could have, when a quarterback has receivers not making plays for him, you can try to do too much, and it can snowball on you, and he didn't let it happen and continues to do a really nice job. How would you grade out the quarterback play?
When you look at how, and I like his demeanor. I mean, he's kind of just feels like and looks like he belongs in the situation that he's in. It's not too big for him. I thought he did a great job. I mean, I'm telling you, and I'm going to tell you this straightforward, other than the penalties, Matt, and other than the drop by CeeDee Lamb, I mean, this offensive line, B+, running backs, absolute B+, tight ends, B, quarterback A. You got to give him an A for functioning in a game that you didn't even expect him to function in.
All right, A for the quarterback. I like it. Let's go over to the defense. And, I mean, you had Donovan Wilson, safety, with a sack. You had like 24 pressures. Micah Parsons was ill all week, had some Pedialyte that he showed up with at the game. And then Demarcus Lawrence, who had not had a lot of pressures this season, 3 sacks, very dominant game. They had the quarterback under duress. Dorrance Armstrong, solid game. Let's start with that pass rush. What did you think of the pass rushers in this game?
I mean, again, they're roll like you said. Dorrance and he blocks the first field goal. I mean, you can tell he's becoming a really good complementary end. Lawrence did a great job, and he took advantage of a guy that wasn't as good as him. Again, you're not going to style point that. But what I like is I like the guys that they're rolling through there. Odighi, Zura. I mean, you're seeing guys roll through the defensive line. To me, that's what gives you the ability to pressure with the 4-man blitz or 4-man rush, because guess what? They're not tired. They're fresh all the time. You saw, and I think that's helping Lawrence some. Guess what else is helping him? The scheme. Sometimes they put him down inside where they can get him over a guard who's not as good and not as athletic as him. You see a defensive coordinator in Dan Quinn who moves his guys around. You mentioned Wilson. I'm going to mention Hooker. I mean, 2 safeties that they'll smack you. I mean, if you come through there, they're going to hit you. The one play that Dallas defense got hit on, it was because Anthony Barr didn't squeeze down on that zone look. But I'm going to tell you something. I like Anthony Barr. I like what he brings. I like that he brings some experience to that linebacker group. Defensive line-wise, Matt, I thought absolutely you can give the defensive line nothing but an A for the fact that they pressured the quarterback all night.
Okay, defensive line A. Linebackers, you mentioned Barr. Van Der Esch made some plays. And the safeties, as you said, sounds like you gave them pretty much a B-plus type grade. Trayvon Diggs, Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis. There were some plays made against all of them, but Trayvon Diggs, game on the line, makes another interception, and, of course, it was a great one, getting the hand below the football. Now, he had some other opportunities, almost made the plays, but seems like Trayvon Diggs is kind of getting back to a little bit of what we remember from last season.
Yeah, and again, he's going to gamble with you some. He misses the pick right there on the comeback. Made a great break on the ball. He was just a tad late. That would have been a pick six. Made a heck of a pick on the ball where he saw the dig route and Sills slipped. He just broke underneath the football and made a heck of a catch. Lewis is he's a good nickel corner. Now they're going to get called some. Joseph got a hands to the face that time. You're going to get some of those. You're going to get some calls against those guys. Just the way the NFL is. But when you look at that group as a whole, I'm talking about the secondary as a whole. They are really playing well. They tackle extremely well. I mean, you don't see guys missing tackles out on the edge. They're throwing themselves around. And then, like I said, you got two safeties who will absolutely hammer you. I mean, you got to give those guys a B plus. And then, like you were saying, linebackers. I mean, I think Vander Esch does a nice job in coverage. I think he's lost a half step. He's not as fast as he was. But, I do like the addition of Barr, and I love what Dan Quinn does with the defense. And then, you look at it overall. Now, again, I'm looking at it overall. You look at the job that Kellen Moore did. You look at the job that Dan Quinn did. And then how about special teams? I mean, they get a big return. They block a field goal. I mean, Bones Fossil, you got to give him some credit too. And maybe, Matt, you could take a little money and buy him a couple more wristbands. He needs some sweatbands. It's a little warm out there.
Man loves a good sweatband. MetLife, it can get a little, you can get sultry there. And so he needs a little bit of that. As you said, a good return by Turpin. That was about 28 yards, and that was extremely helpful. And then the kick block, great penetration. The block is made, and the Cowboys special teams, a much maligned group, only like a year ago from Stretch, now being praised. And now Bones Fossil, one of Stretch's favorite men in the NFL. Stretch, I appreciate it, and I hope you appreciate the big-time haircut that I got after being called for mopery and really accosted for quite some time. I think you'd have to admit this was a pretty aggressive haircut.
Well, I mean, you've said it twice, and you want to sit in there and pat yourself on the back for doing something you ought to do. You know what, Mosley, good for you for getting a haircut, on the podcast. Let's give everybody a knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone. Mosley got him a haircut. Good for you, Mosley. You don't look like a mutt anymore.
Oh, Frito loves it. Frito loves that. You should see him over here. Just a big old belly laugh. It is the Doomsday Podcast Stretch Plays with Glenn Stretch Smith. Thank you, Stretch, and we will talk to you next week after the Cowboys play the Commanders.
See you, buddy.